All right, everyone, we are going to get started now. Thank you so much for your patience. Unfortunately, I think there will still be a couple of beeps as people join, but hopefully we won't get too distracted by those. My name is Joanne Scheneider. I'm here with John Sadow. We're both on the business development team of Google Consumer Surveys. So we're here to give you a little bit of an overview of the product. John's going to go through all the basics with you, and then I will jump into a demo so you can see what it actually looks like. And we'll leave plenty of time at the end to answer your questions, which you can ask us in that chat box that you see in your meeting dashboard. And just so you're aware, the chat will default to sending to the entire audience. So without further ado, I will pass it over to John.
Thanks, Joanne. So thanks, everybody, for joining this morning. I know that it seems like some people might be having a few issues with the phone calling and things like that. Feel free to continue to sort of troubleshoot those in the chat. And we'll do our best not to chuckle too hard at the noise of the dings coming through in the background. It sounds a little bit like Vanna White turning over letters in Wheel of Fortune. So what we're hoping to do today is talk a little bit about sort of the background of Google Consumer Surveys, about the product, its methodology, some of the sort of things that have developed on our end over the last 6-8 months as we've been building Google Consumer Surveys, and really to show off a little bit of what it can do. To dive into some of the features and to really show off some of the data that we've been able to collect. So again, thanks all for joining, and I'm going to jump in now. So we are Google Consumer Surveys, which is an innovative online research tool. And real fast, there is a quick question. I will share the deck when it's finished, so you'll be able to check out all these materials and play around with the links and things like that afterwards. So what are we doing? What is Google Consumer Surveys, and sort of what are we here to talk about today? So over the last 8 or so months, as Google Consumer Surveys has jumped into the market research space, we've really set out to build a new and distinct platform for collecting online research. As a company, as many of you hopefully know from your own experience as users, the goal we really have is to help bring technology to unlock data and to really improve everyone's experience on the internet and the way that they are able to access different information online. And so we've done exactly that with Google Consumer Surveys and tried to build a market research tool that actually accomplishes a few of those goals, and in the end the byproduct is a pretty robust online survey platform that we hope that you guys will be interested in. So I always like to start off with this quote because I think it really puts in perspective what gets us excited about the product, right? And it's really, I think, for anyone who's joined the presentation who works in market research or who has a data background, this is probably something that fuels you guys as well. And that is that there really are all kinds of things out there, incredible things that we can discover and that we can go out and try to find using research and otherwise. But really, I think what we're trying to do is help connect businesses and individuals with data that perhaps they don't already have access to, or a new form of data that they didn't think they could get access to in the past. And so, to bring up some of the ideas that sort of we think about when we think about connecting people to this type of data, from a research perspective, we ask a lot of what ifs, right? So if you think about the research that you do now or the research that maybe you've done in the past, we sort of push with these questions, such as, what if you could model consumption behavior daily, right? Instead of doing it weekly or monthly or checking in on a consumption model, what if you could actually do that daily and have a platform that moves quick enough and has the scale that allows you to access data fast enough and robustly enough to do that on a more frequent basis? Or similarly, what if you could access consumer trends in near real time? What if instead of having to read data about what happened a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago or wait on some sort of report, you could actually get a measurement of those trends in real time as they're happening? Maybe it's brand awareness. Maybe you can run a daily brand awareness survey and keep track of your business on a daily basis as opposed to a quarterly or annual basis. And then another sort of different take, what if insights and other types of data analysis could be done automatically? And what if we could use technology to power some of that discovery, some of the research process, as opposed to the manual piece, and actually take technology and use it to our advantage to become more skilled, more adept, more agile researchers? And as you might suspect, these are the things that we're setting out to accomplish as a platform and as a product. And so that's a good segue into, okay, so what actually is the platform and how does it actually work? And in a few minutes, we'll detail exactly how the methodology works, who we sample, how we're getting this data, what other data we're leveraging on the back end. But as a whole, a couple of the key points about the product. One is that what's really unique about Google Consumer Surveys is that when we collect data, we're collecting data just from everyday consumers. These aren't folks who have signed up for a panel. They're not often walk by people in the mall. These are actually just everyday consumers who are sort of going about their business on the internet. And this will make more sense in a few minutes, but they're just folks who are looking to watch a video, read an article, learn a little bit about something, and that's who's sort of part of the sample that we're actually collecting data from. And what's perhaps even more important than who the people are, it's that these folks really are a valid and representative sample of the U.S. internet population, or in other cases outside of the U.S., perhaps it's the UK or Canada. But these are valid representative respondents, even though they're not part of a panel or perhaps a more traditional research body that you guys may be more familiar with. And so we've done a couple of things. I want to highlight this for a minute over the last few months to really push forward in terms of our data quality and sort of show what our platform is capable of. And so two of the things I wanted to just highlight are, over the last few months, the Pew Research Center has actually been undertaking a pretty extensive methodological analysis of the platform to benchmark our data against their own data collected through random digit dial. And if you Google it, you can find that there's actually a full sort of 30-page analysis that they produced looking at how our data collected using our methodology compared to the data that they collected. And they were very happy with the results, and that sort of culminated in a joint report that we released around the election. So something really the first time an outside party has looked at our data and shown that even when compared to a high standard of quality such as random digit dialing, they were quite pleased. And then in another example, one that's a little timely, in that we just finished the election a couple of weeks ago, and one that we were pretty excited about is we did some election work this year. And this is our first major election as a product sort of being in existence. And a gentleman from the New York Times who probably many of you are familiar with of his recent fame, his name is Nate Silver. He did a roundup looking at all of the different pre-election polls. And he found that Google Consumer Surveys was actually the most accurate online poll leading into the election. And so for us, we saw that as a scorecard or as a grade on our quality and our performance as a product. And we were pretty excited that we were able to get so close to the actual data. So just some background, some support for the quality of the data, which really is something that often gets lost, I think, in online sort of self-service models, and something that really is a focal point for us. And so we'll talk through a little bit how technology drives the speed, the automation with which we can collect this data, getting results in less than a couple of days, using automation to bring insights forward. And so as we dive in here, let me get into to tee up how the methodology actually works and really what ties the system together. So we actually start the explanation by looking at a somewhat different issue or different area of online content or the internet, in the world of the internet publishing world. And so when we actually set out to build this product, one of the things we were looking to do was find a better way to help publishers monetize online content. And so that means newspaper articles, different reference material, video, music, things like that. We wanted to help them find a way to make money for their content without us having to always ask users to pay for it. So we'll show you an example of this in the wild in a few minutes, but the best example perhaps is something like the New York Times, where you can read a certain number of articles a month, but currently they ask you to subscribe or to register and pay in order to continue to read the content. And so we wanted to find a way to help people access that content without having to pay for it. And so we did a lot of testing, and we found that users are pretty interested and willing to answer survey questions. And so we developed what we call micro-surveys. And so if you start on the left here, you actually see how this process comes to be, which is a user might come and visit a news site, reference site, an entertainment site in the Google Consumer Surveys network. So this is a network of publishers, of over 100 publishers that we've curated and built that are providing what we think is high-quality content on the internet. Then they get to that article, and in order to access that content, we ask them to just answer a 1 to 2 question micro-survey. In exchange for content for a day or for a week, perhaps it's a month or even longer, all they have to do is answer a 1 to 2 question survey, and they can get access to that content. In return, we pay out the publishers to help them continue to monetize their site, And we collect and analyze that data and give it back to researchers or businesses or folks like everyone on this call in order to use as market research. And so this is the ecosystem that we've built in the platform and the way that we've sort of been able to create a balance between how we collect the data and the value proposition we have for publishers, for users, and also for researchers. So I'm going to pass it off to Joanne, and she's actually going to jump to some live examples to show you how this works in practice.
All right. So we're going to show you what this looks like both from the respondent experience and then also as the researcher experience. What does it actually look like to create a survey and to see your results? So what we have here, what you're seeing here, is the Newton Daily News. So this is just one of many publishers in our network. As John mentioned, a publisher, when we say publisher, we really just mean any kind of online content. So that could mean news sites, both big and small. It could mean reference sites, entertainment sites, image galleries, those kinds of things. Really any type of content that people are trying to access. So here's the Newton Daily News. It's a small newspaper in Iowa. And what you can see here is the beginning of an article at the top. So there's a little snippet of an article, followed by a survey prompt. This actually is not a great example because the reason that we actually use the Newton Daily News is because they surface questions on many of their articles. So the key here is that the publisher themselves is actually in control of how often they want to show these prompts. So if they want to show it in every article, that's fine. If they want to gate it by only the most popular articles or maybe only after someone has clicked on 5, that's completely up to them. So we use this as a demo because they have put them on many, I think actually all of their articles. So what you'll see here is it says answer a question to continue reading this page, and then you'll see a survey question with 4 prompts. And so essentially the way this works is the respondent sees this and would essentially answer a question in exchange for content. Obviously this is not a prime example only because this article is really quite short. And the other thing to note is it says question 1 of 2. So John alluded to this, but and we'll get into this a little bit more too. We do limit you to asking 2 questions, 1 to 2 questions at a time. And the reason is that we really protect the respondent experience. Because we know as soon as people find these questions annoying or spammy or they take too long, they're either going to go elsewhere to find their content or they're just going to kind of click through the answers, and that won't be very good data. So some other things to note is we see about 3 million unique respondents a month now. We only just launched in April, and we're growing very quickly. And also, these are really everyday users. So the goal here is really to find everyday Internet users that are browsing these sites, and we've built our publisher network specifically so that we can get into all the different demographics that you might need, and so that we can build a representative sample. So I think that's the next question to talk about is how do we make sure this is representative? How do we make sure this isn't just, only people who are reading the Newton Daily News when I'm interested in the U.S. population? That gets into our 3 different types of targeting options. So what you'll see here is these are 3 different, we have on the left is our general population. So this is very basic. If you want to get just a representative sample of people in the U.S., UK, or Canada, this would be your option. Currently we are only available in those 3 markets, but we hope to expand very quickly. As I said, we only just launched in April, and so we've already added the UK and Canada, and we expect to add other English-speaking countries soon. So you can see the pricing here too. We charge 10 cents per response. This is a prepay model, and I'll show you how that looks in just a minute. So you essentially would pick the number of responses, and you would pay before your survey is actually run. The targeting options, there's 2 different types of targeting options. You can either choose to target by demographics, and that's something that we'll get into in just a moment, where you'd essentially pick basic demographic buckets such as gender and age or location, and you could make sure that your question is only exposed to those people, and that costs 50 cents per response. You can also target to a custom audience, which is where the 1 to 2 question comes from, where essentially you'd be able to ask a screening question to get to a more niche population than just basic age and gender or geography. But so I think the next question is, how do we even know who those people are? How do we know these demographics? So this is actually an algorithm that we were able to borrow from the ad side of Google, which is a very handy part of being part of Google, where essentially we're able to infer basic demographics about people based on their browsing history. So I won't get into too much of the weeds now, although I'm happy to talk offline with people how that actually works. But essentially to a very high degree of accuracy, we're able to make these inferences according to age in 10-year buckets and gender. So I'll show you what that looks like in the analytics in just a moment. So you'll see here that both of the targeting options are 50 cents per response. The recommended number of responses will vary based on general population and targeting, of course, because the field size is different. So let's jump in to the creator. All right, so here we are on our homepage. The easiest way to get to us is by searching for Google Consumer Surveys, and we'll be the first result that comes up. This is a great resource if you're looking for validation papers. You can see the study that Pew wrote up on us, and we have a bunch of other fun stuff on there too, example surveys, case studies, and things like that. So the easiest way to create a survey, and anyone can do this if they have a Google account, is you go ahead and click the Create Survey button. We've preloaded a survey in here for you. So here we have, we're going to do a basic survey on dog toys. So this is going to be a small business, and they're wanting to run a couple questions on dog toys. So you'll see this is a 4-step process, and this one is really just for your basic organizational purposes. This is not something that the respondent would see. All right. So here we are in the writing question step. So you can see here that I have 8 different questions loaded into the creator. So I won't go through all of them, but the point being that we have many different question types. I'll pull that up right here. So you can see all the different question types. We have multiple choice, multiple select, star ratings. Sorry, this keeps jumping around. And you can also, of course, load images in there. So if you wanted a single image and you wanted people to comment on that image, or maybe you wanted to upload multiple images and have people pick the one they liked the best. We've also recently rolled out open-ended. So we have open-ended numeric and open-ended text questions. And I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. And essentially that's your ability to just sort of cue unaided responses without biasing the results that you're giving them. Let me go down here. And so essentially at the 4th step, you come to the payment page. This is very easy. This is the same for any size business. You can just pick your responses. You'll see here on the left, you can pick how often you want it to recur. This can be really good for tracking surveys if you want them to recur on a certain basis. And then you'll see the price is calculated for you. And you simply enter a credit card and the transaction is complete. Of course, for larger companies, we're happy to work with you and set up invoicing or however it is that you guys normally like to pay. So now I'm going to jump in to what the actual results of this survey would have looked like since we already ran it. So something that I didn't show you in the creator is we have here at the top is a screening question. And underneath it, there are 8 subsequent questions. So I think the thing to note here is any one respondent would see the screening question and one of the follow-up questions. You can see here that they each got 1,500 responses, and those are 1,500 demographically similar but different sets of people. So I think that's sort of a key part to understand here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the first question. This is our main analytics interface, and this will look similar for any of the question types that you run. You'll see in the middle here that we have the main histogram where you can see the overall results. And on the left here, you can see all the different demographics buckets that I was referring to earlier. So you can see the inferred gender and inferred age, and then geography, which we have with your IP address. And then we're able to layer U.S. Census data over the IP address and come up with some other fun stuff like urban density and income. You can see if I go ahead and click on the different gender buckets, the bars will move accordingly. I can also compare according to the different buckets so I can see how different ages answered each of the individual responses. And the other thing that you can see is how well we actually were able to match up to U.S. Census data. So in this left column, this is the actual demographic breakdown of this particular question. And then you'll see in this column, it says CPS. This is the U.S. Census data. So you can see just how much we're accommodating for any discrepancies that might be in the data, and we're going to weight it. You can, of course, turn weighting off if you would like. You can also export your results. So if you want to see the raw data for yourself, you're, of course, welcome to do that. And another interesting part is, and you can sort of flip between questions using these arrows. So this is an open-ended numeric example. So this can be great for assessing willingness to pay without giving people an upper and lower bound to bias the results. And you can see here this little light bulb. This is our Insights tab. So the number of insights is actually going to vary according to each survey. And this is really just the most statistically significant insights based on these demographics that we're able to just automatically pull for you. So as the results are coming in, which by the way you can see as they're coming in, even when there's only a single response, you can watch them roll in. We're aggregating them. So, for instance here, income affected how high people answered on the scale, or, regional differences or gender differences and things like that. So this can be a great way to kind of pull out the quick nuggets without having to mine the data yourself. One other thing to show you, this is actually something that we recently released. This is our holiday portal. So for those of you who do any kind of retail-based research, we ran a bunch of stuff for the holidays, just kind of fun to know stuff. You can see here that we did some open-ended text questions. So here it's in one word, how would you describe what it's like to do holiday shopping online? And you can see we have a cute little word cloud. If you jump into those reports, we are able to actually aggregate by synonym and by sentiment and things like that. So this can be a great resource just for looking at use cases. In general, I recommend checking out our example surveys tab. You can also see the work that we did on the election. And of course the report that we did with the Pew Research Center. So with that, I think we've actually gone through our formal presentation, so we'll now take questions in the chat. And thanks again for joining us.
All right, so we're going to jump into some questions here. There's plenty coming in, so we've got to sort of sort through our chat list here. So bear with us. So I'm just going to go from the bottom. So if you asked a question earlier on, the newer questions are replacing it. So we will get that. We'll work our way up. So I apologize if it seems a little out of order from when you asked your question. The most recent question is about B2B surveys. So we can accommodate B2B surveys, but it's all relative to the actual incidence rate that we can find using a screening question. So you would set up your survey looking for particular screening criteria. Let's say you're looking for small business owners, right? So the incidence of small business owners is between like 12 and 15%. And so we can find, for example, small business owners in just exactly that way. If you're looking for CPAs that work at a firm of more than 1,000 people, that incidence really falls in the less than 1% group, which really isn't best for us as far as a B2B type project. And so it's not our sweet spot yet, and so that's sort of how we think about what B2B we can handle, what B2B is not great for us. So there's a question about the way that we handle our reweighting. So when we get data in, as Joanne showed off, we do reweight that data at a high level, and then with every level deeper that you go, we will also reweight that data, provided we have enough respondent information to do the full reweighting. So if you drill down to just females 18 to 24 in, within cities in Montana, we probably will no longer weight that data because we don't have enough information to weight by. But provided we have enough data for a particular state or subpopulation, we will reweight that data wherever possible and, of course, wherever needed. We don't always need to based on the distribution.
Okay, so there's a question about geographic targeting and how narrow that we can target. So in the interface, you'll see that you can target by right down to state, to the state level. If you're interested in doing more specific targeting, that would be best to talk to John or I. You can see our email addresses listed right there. And we are able to target by zip prefix, although we would want to sort of talk about the specific stuff that you were wanting to do. And then the other question attached to that same one was whether or not you're charged for responses to the screener question, and the answer is you are not. So all the responses to the screening question are kind of freebies, and then you're only charged for the actual number per follow-up question.
Okay, so a question about how we infer the age and gender of our respondents. And so the way that we do this is based on evaluating what we call browser behavior or looking at cookie profiles. And so this is something that Google's been doing long before our product actually existed for our advertising business. And essentially what we do is we look at every browser, a specific computer browser, and that browser has a cookie. And when that user visits different sites in the Google advertising network, which is a pretty vast number of sites on the internet, we build a profile of the types of sites that they go to, what sites they are, how frequently they go, how recently they've gone, things like that. And over time, we've built an algorithm over the last 5 years where we look at a person's particular profile against some hard benchmark data that we have, and we use that to infer if we have a statistically significant indication, whether they're a male or a female, whether they're 18 or 25 or 35. And so we have this algorithm that's constantly improving, and so it's not always perfect, but by and large it allows us to determine and understand what their age and gender are. And then for the other components that we provide, we use IP addresses to approximate a zip code. And then we match up that zip code data to census data for that particular zip code to come to our approximations of average household income and urban density. So that's how we're able overall to sort of get those 5 demographic and geographic factors when we're profiling our respondents and targeting them, et cetera. So one of the other questions about screening questions. So the question was about once you've found your screening audience, how many questions can you ask them? And so this is, of course, one of the nuances of our product, and one of the trickier things is that the most questions a user will ever see is the screening question and 1 follow-up question. So in the survey example that Joanne showed that has 8 follow-up questions, each of those respondents first answered that they were a dog owner, and then answered 1 of the follow-up questions. Now we're going to distribute evenly from 1 follow-up question to the other to make sure that we're seeing the right number of everyone is a dog owner, we're seeing the right number of men and women, right number of age groups, et cetera, so that the samples from one question to another are nearly identical, except it's not the same people. The pro is that you get a much wider scale of respondents, a wider set of respondents. The trade-off is that there's not a ton of inter-question correlations that you can run. You can do things pairwise because you can correlate between the screener and the follow-up, but for a longer survey you can't cross-tab or segment between questions in our current form. There is another question about APIs and accessing both, I guess, the analysis piece of the site as well as the input. And so for APIs, it's something that we are interested in building in the long run. One thing we'd like to be able to do is help people embed our results into their own analysis or into their own web page or whatever they'd like. We'd also like to be able to help people access the raw data, maybe through an API or something like that. The other is we'd also like to build an API to help people create questions at scale. So these are all things that are on our radar and definitely of interest to us as a business and something we'll probably do long term.
So there's another question about whether clients use this for professional audiences, and then there are a couple questions about B2B work. So generally I think what we would say to that is that this is generally a consumer product. So it's primarily for consumer research. And the rule of thumb essentially is for any kind of incidence of a population that makes up at least 5% of the geographic area that you're targeting, this is a great tool for that. If you're looking for lower incidences in that, we might be able to do it, but that's another thing that you would want to talk to John or I about. Another question about how do we know income. So this is one of the things I mentioned where we are actually able to layer over census data. So once we have your IP address, we can pull median income and urban density, but we don't allow you to target by these metrics.
So a couple other questions. I'll try to go with some quick ones. So one about the registration process. So basically, in order to get started with the product, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I'm going to do my best to answer. All you have to do when you quote-unquote register is have a Google account. So if you use Gmail or Google Calendar or any other Google product, YouTube or otherwise, you already have a Google account. And everything that you do is purely sort of anonymous and owned by that account. So all you can do, you can log in and create a survey at any time. Of course, you can reach out to myself or to Joanne for help with your work. But all you need to do is log in, and you can use a credit card right through the process of building your survey. And again, you can always reach out to us to work and set up invoicing or something like that. Another question was about insights being driven by basically how we collect our insights and what's going on behind the scenes. Everything that you see was built by us. So we've created a model that does statistical tests on the back end as the data is coming in, and we look for a 98% confidence in determining if something is an insight. So we're constantly looking up different tests within the subpopulations, gender, age, et cetera, and beyond. And once we hit something that's 98% that has a 98% level of confidence, that's when we'll raise it and call it an insight. Sometimes that's 2 insights for a survey. Sometimes it's 30. It really just depends. There's a question, an easy question of how do you access the tool? So if you just do a search for Google Consumer Surveys, you'll land at our homepage. And if you click the Get Started or Create button in the top right, that'll get you into our survey creator, and you can build an entire survey from scratch right there and keep it going. Just going to keep rifling off some questions. Thanks for so many of them. We really appreciate it. We can do, so a couple questions about question types. We don't do any graphical questions quite yet, so nothing with grids or X and Y planes or things like that. We do multiple logo testing, multiple image testing. We can do open-ended response to an image, so if you wanted to do unaided image awareness or something like that. Those are all possible. And if you get into the survey creator, when you get to step 3, you can easily set that up and choose which question you want, and you'll see the exact preview that your respondent would see. So there's no questions as far as what is the respondent going to see or how are they going to be able to interact with it.
So there's a question about placement of the survey and how we actually disperse it, and is it related to is it all the properties or is it just a subset? So I think the answer to that is we've specifically built our publisher network to span all the different demographics that we're looking for. And so we're making sure, or our algorithm is making sure, that every single question that you ask is going to be representative of those demographics. So it's for this reason that we actually don't allow you to target a certain set of properties or say you only want a certain set of categories or things like that. So the customer does not actually control any of that placement, and that's something that we are actually controlling, that dispersal.
So one of the more recent questions that came in that I actually can demo an answer to is someone asked, can we show what some of these automatic insights look like for an open-ended question? So I'm pulling back up our holiday site that Joanne pointed to, and I got to this through our homepage and then through our example surveys link you can get here. And you can see here we have screenshots of word clouds, but I'll actually jump into what some of these surveys look like. So this is a really fun one. This is comparing on top online shopping and how people feel about online shopping to holiday shopping in stores. And so if I jump into this full report, and you can do all of this at home, you'll see that for some of these open-ended questions, we don't really think of them as insights, right? We are working on building some insights and population-type analysis for open-ended questions. But the bigger thing we have is we've been working on building a natural language processing sort of tool or backend. So you can see here that this is actually a curated group, so this is something we manually curated. If you actually look here on the right-hand side, you can actually uncheck and check different answers. It adjusts the word cloud. You can group them as you please. We also have built-in options for sentiment and synonym analysis. But you can see we've already actually done some of this. So easier and easy have paired together. Good, great, and nice have paired together. A couple of the less positive sentiments have been brought together. Here you can see a whole bunch of synonyms in this group. And so you can see that we're able to process the data as it's coming in, aggregate it, provide it back to you. We use the word cloud from an aesthetic perspective, but really the really more interesting piece here is being able to automatically group this data by synonym or sentiment on the fly so that you don't have to do any coding. You don't have to download the spreadsheet. You can if you'd like to. But it just makes it a little more agile and a great example of how we could do really sort of robust, nearly qualitative research. And again, same price, same turnaround time, so still sort of adhering to many of the features that we stress about the product. So one person wrote in that they check their ad preferences and they don't look in their ad preferences like they would to our survey. So said that it's classifying them as perhaps the wrong age or wrong gender. I'm not sure which. And so the key here is that inferred demographics, we think, are a huge step forward in helping us speed up the way that we do our research, right? And also maintaining a high quality without having to ask people a bunch of questions. And so the truth is, though, they're not perfect, right? Inferred demographics aren't always going to be right. we have done extensive validation, and the team that works on these has done pretty extensive validation. So they benchmark against actual panel studies. They benchmark against YouTube member profiles. And we found in our own testing that 80 to 90+%, we found 80 to 90+% accuracy for age and gender. That's not always right, and if you work in an industry that perhaps is predominantly other genders or other ages, sometimes your work computer can mislabel you. But we are working also on our own proprietary ways of validating this data and essentially overriding it if we find that we have a flaw. So something that we're constantly working to improve on. And if 100% accuracy is actually required, we encourage you to use the screening question at the same cost to use self-reported demographics.
There's a question here about whether respondents sign an agreement before they actually respond. So this is something I think is very clear. We want to be clear up front. These are everyday Internet users. There is no agreement. So if you're putting proprietary information, you cannot have someone sign an NDA. So if you're going to put some new packaging or some new branding stuff, this is definitely something you want to be considering, because this is going to be dispersed across the Internet and anyone can see it, and you will not know who those people are. There's another question here about whether or not you can export the data. So the answer is yes, and John mentioned that just now a little bit, so I think maybe we covered it. You can also share the survey with your colleagues. So there's a button. If you're familiar with the Google Docs model where you can kind of make the survey available to anyone with the link, it's a similar system here.
So there's a question about, can our microsurveys target a Google+ audience? So right now we don't integrate at all with Google+ or with Google search data or any of the behavioral data like that, in the sense that we don't want people's experience on different publisher sites to be impeded or changed because of what what their Google account says about them in Google+. So the cookie is totally distinct from a Google account in our current setup, and so no targeting to Google+ or incorporation of that data on the back end. Another question I think is really, really important here is how do we prevent things like Autobots from falsely filling out answers? And actually, I'll take this question even one step further. How do we prevent just people who don't want to answer these questions from answering them too quickly or dishonestly? Of course, our validation has showed that we get to accurate data and that we're able to do this, so you might be able to guess that we have some of these sort of what we call spam controls built in. We have a pretty extensive set of these controls in place, looking at speed and nature of response, past response history, different information we have about the user's cookie and the user's IP and things like that, where we will throw out what we consider bad data on the fly. And so if we find that we don't think a response is genuine, we throw that out on the fly. You don't have to pay for it. So I can't get into too many of the technical details, but we do have a pretty extensive process in place, and that's what we think really is validated by the sort of studies done by Pew and other folks to show that our data quality is so high, is that we are able to throw out that sort of bad sample as we go, which of course is not a high percentage of what we're doing in the first place.
So another question sort of related to the one I answered a little bit earlier, does the respondent get to see or receive any survey results? So again, the answer to this is no. So you essentially, as the researcher, will not have any relationship with the respondent. So this also extends to, you're not able to ask them to give them your email address for follow-up. This really is intended to be kind of just basic survey. We're dispersing it across the Internet. You're getting everyday users, and we don't want them to feel that they're going to be beholden to any kind of relationship with you afterwards. And that, once again, that's sort of protecting our respondent experience, as I mentioned earlier. As soon as users feel like they're going to be beholden or they're going to somehow be prompted for advertising afterwards or whatever, people aren't going to want to answer our questions, and therefore our data would be junk. And so that's why we're highly protective of that experience.
One quick thing to interject here. I know that some people are probably going to want to drop off. I don't know if you have this booked on the whole calendar. Our emails are up on the screen, so you can feel free to reach out to either of us if you have a project you'd like to work with us on. So please go ahead and reach out if you have something and you want to get started. And otherwise, you can feel free to hang around, and we'll continue to answer some questions. So one question that's come in, I think, a couple times is about the IP address. We do map the zip prefix. Yeah, so everything maps down to zip prefix, or the first 3 digits, which is pretty standard and allows us to get at all the different DMAs and zip areas that we need to. So another question about pricing. So everything is done on a per response, per question basis. So if you have 10 questions with demo targeting, that would be 50 cents a response. So Yeah, $5 for complete for that entire survey to respond. And so, if you're targeting men or women and you need 250 completes, it would be 10 questions times 50 times 50 cents a response times X number of responses. So just a way to think about the pricing.
So we don't provide info regarding the specific sites that your survey was exposed on, but if you go, we can go back to the demo site, you can see a category breakdown. So the percentage of news, reference, and entertainment. So John is showing you right now. Yep, so you can see the publisher categories right there.
There's a question about will you be able to eventually target by industry or job function? We'd love to be able to. I think it's a matter of figuring out a good way to be able to do that, but we'd love to help B2B users or researchers conduct that research more capably. And one of the things that we are capable of or interested in is, alongside some of that other inferred data that we use for our demographics, we do sit on a lot of what we call interest category data. And so this interest category data looks at what sites people visit and then ultimately what we think they're quote-unquote interested in because of that. And so that is something that we're hoping to incorporate into our product sooner than later to help you target by, let's say, auto enthusiasts or sports fanatics or things like that.
There's some more questions about publishers and wanting a list of publishers. So we don't actually release a full list of the publishers, but I can rattle off a couple more names just to kind of give you guys a sense. So in terms of some of the larger newspapers, we have Christian Science Monitor and New York Daily News. Smaller, kind of more local newspapers, we have the Texas Tribune and the Denver Post. We have Reader's Digest. We have more kind of entertainment sites like Pandora, and also kind of like synonym type sites, synonym.com, reference sites like that. So that should sort of give you a sense.
Another question about mobile. A couple questions about mobile, actually. So two big things. In our current form, our surveys do not show up on mobile devices, except for sporadic testing that we do, which is almost all on our end. We will show up on a tablet if it's a full tablet experience and the publisher has decided to enable this on tablets. And so I'd say it's about 98% desktop and then a couple percentage points tablet. Going forward, we do have a lot of interest in the mobile space. We have some other solutions we think are going to work in mobile, and so that's something definitely to stay tuned to.
There's a question about minimum pricing in terms of dollars. So the answer is yes. And so one thing that you'll notice when you go to the pricing page is we give you 3 sets of options in terms of the number of responses that you can get. And essentially this is our recommendation of statistical significance, knowing the different variations and biases that we're trying to accommodate for this being an internet sample. So to give you a sense, for a general U.S. population, we generally recommend 1,500 responses, so that's at 10 cents per response, effectively $150 per question. There's a lower amount at 1,000 responses, and there's also a higher amount too. For targeted questions, you don't need as many responses. So it's 50 cents per response, but we recommend 500 responses. We do see companies going down to 200 too if they just want a quick gut check and they're not as worried about statistical significance.
So a couple other quick questions. One is an easy one, good. So screening questions, do they have to be a yes or no question? So actually no, screening questions don't even have to be a multiple choice question. They can be an image question with 2 choices. When you set up your screening question, actually, why don't I just do this real fast? So if I go into our survey creator and go to create a survey, I'll just set this up as our webinar test. And you can see here in our second question, this is what we didn't get to show before because it wasn't enabled in our other survey example. If I go to set up a screening question, I can ask, let's say, when was the last time you went to the mall? And then when I answer my answer, I could say yesterday, last week, last month. And you can see that I have the ability to flag which answers I'm looking at. So let's say I just want people who say within the last month. And I don't want this last year option. Only the users who respond one of these 3 answers will actually then go on to see one of the questions from your survey. So you have the ability to set it up with multiple flags, and in the results, you can actually segment the results by the answers to the screener. So I'd be able to compare, just as I do with demographics, how people who said yesterday compared to people who said last week compared to people who said last month. One of the more interesting examples of this recently, just to share a good case study, is we did some investigation in the mattress category. We found that there were these really interesting correlations between the size of the mattress and how willing people were to buy online, and actually some pretty key differences in the way that people shop for those mattresses. So maybe not groundbreaking discoveries, but really easily done through our platform and using this segmentation capability for the screener question to quickly and easily dive through the data looking at how did single mattress buyers respond versus queen mattress and so on. So just a good example of how we can do a little bit more than just yes/no with the screening capability.
Two quick questions here. One, someone's asking what countries these surveys are available in. So we mentioned this briefly before, but just to reiterate, currently we're only available in the U.S., UK, and Canada. Again, we're looking to expand into other English-speaking countries soon, and then the rest of the world soon after that. We were able to expand into these 3 countries in just a couple of months, so we're confident we can get into the rest soon. And then what percentage of readers click on surveys versus abandon? So essentially, what is your response rate? And so we're actually very proud of this fact, and this again comes to our protection of the respondent experience, is we're seeing 20 to 30% response rate on our questions. So if you're familiar with other online surveys, this is much, much higher than other online surveys, which are typically around 1%. So we think this speaks to the fact that people really are willing to answer these questions in order to access this content.
So there's a question about constant sum questions and discrete choices. So if I understand this question correctly, your options with anything related to numeric are, we do have open-ended numeric questions, in which case we'll stratify the data for you into the most logical groups. We'll show you the average of the data, et cetera. And then, of course, you can have discrete choices with a multiple choice question or something like that. If I don't understand the nature of the question, feel free to ask it again. We got another question about zip codes. We do map the zip prefix, so the first 3 digits of the zip code. As far as languages that we might use to ask a survey, we only work right now in English, and the main reason for that is because all of our publications are in English. We do have some plans in 2013 to expand to non-English surveys, to non-English publishers, so that's something to stay tuned in, starting with probably some of the other languages in the U.S. and also helping us to expand our reach overseas and non-English speaking countries as well. There's a question about microsurveys and Google ads. So do we put our surveys where Google ads are? So the way that our publisher network works is completely and wholly distinct from our AdSense network or our online publishing network for advertisers or ad placements. The surveys will only show up on publishers that we have curated. There's only about 100 of them. And it's because we have to really have a high threshold for quality of content. There's a step-by-step integration process, et cetera, whereas AdSense is really an at-scale product. So the surveys will show up in a different place from where those ads might show up. One question about healthcare publishers and about other content as well. So we can't say specifically what types of content we have. We do have all kinds of different content in industries such as healthcare and travel and beauty and women's lifestyle, sports, athletics, other things like that. So there's all that kind of data out there. The key here is we don't allow you to target by publisher because we don't want to introduce any type of bias into the data, right? If you might think, okay, if I want business folks, I want something like the Wall Street Journal. The reality is we trust, or we ask you to just trust us to use a screening question for that. So if you want people who read an above average number of travel publications or who or perhaps have a particular health issue or are interested in particular healthcare issues, all you should do is use a screening question to get to that audience, and we'll find them across our network. And maybe we'll get a more balanced view of who those folks are because we're not targeting into a certain type of publisher. Very similar thing, and this answers another question for how you would target ethnicities. Right? So same thing. If you're looking for someone who, if you're looking for English-speaking Hispanics, and again, I say English-speaking because we don't accommodate non-English language yet, you can simply ask a question that says, do you consider yourself an English-speaking, predominantly English-speaking Hispanic American or something like that, and we'll find the right folks for you in the screening process. And because you don't pay for the screening answers or the no answers to your screening question, there's no sort of additional cost to you. Another question was about the sponsorship of our surveys. All our surveys are only sponsored by Google. They're not going to be sponsored or co-sponsored by any other person asking the question. And from a data quality perspective, that's something we do to ensure that we have the highest possible data and we're not introducing any bias, right? If we're McDonald's, we probably don't want to ask people if they like hamburgers and then rely on that data to be an accurate sample of the United States.
Okay, we have a question on the limit of number of answer options per question. So obviously there are tons of different question types. If we're referring to multiple choice and multiple select, we do limit you to only show 5 options at a time. You can put more in if you would like us to randomly sort through those and show them at a time, but we only expose 5 questions at a time. And again, this is really to make sure that the respondent can answer the question very quickly without kind of relying on them to read through every single answer.
Question about a 10-point scale. So right now we have 5 and 7-point star scales. We do have plans to introduce a 10-point, 11-point scale, and actually anything from, I think, 3 to 11 sometime probably by the end of the year. So something to check back on, and feel free to shoot me an email or shoot Joanne an email to keep tabs and we can update you.
Cool. Well, it looks like, oh, we got some more questions.
So a good question about sample length. So we think that there's a question here about whether or not we plan to ask more than 2 questions. There's sort of 2 sides to this answer. One is that we do think that a lot of research can be accomplished using shorter, more iterative style surveys. So instead of asking 25 questions, asking in bits, asking over time. And we think that we're cheap enough and fast enough that you can do that with us without the risk that it would pose in another platform. So one thing we do is encourage people to think about how they could maybe do their surveys in shorter bits and get better data as a result of that. The other side is we do know that there are times where you need some multi-level screening criteria in place, or you do need the complexity or interrelation of questions. So it is something that we're interested in providing in the long term and something we'll probably continue to investigate a good solution for. The number one thing is as long as it doesn't change the respondent experience, we'll be interested in pursuing it. So we'll never get to a point where we're asking respondents to answer 5 or 10 questions in order to read an article or something like that.
It looks like the questions are slowing down, so I think we're going to wrap up here. We'll hang on for a few more minutes in case there are any more. But as John mentioned, you can see our email addresses on the screen, so feel free to shoot us an email if you have more questions or if you want to set up a call. We're happy to chat through use cases with you or talk about how you might want to test and validate our product. Just let us know how we can help. Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we hope to work with you soon.
Yeah, real quick, we will send out the presentation. I know that Eric and the folks running the webinar are going to send it all out with a follow-up, contact information, things like that. So really appreciate everyone coming, and have a great rest of the day.